Monet refuses the operation. Doctor, you say that there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and that what I see is an aberration caused by old age, an affliction. I tell you, it has taken me all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges you regret I don't see. To learn that the line I call the horizon does not exist, and sky and water, so long apart, are the same state of being. 54 years before I could see Rouen Cathedral is built of parallel shafts of sun. And now you want to restore my youthful errors? Fixed notions of top and bottom? The illusion of three-dimensional space? Wisteria, separate from the bridge it covers? What can I say to convince you the Houses of Parliament dissolve night after night to become the fluid dream of the Thames? I will not return to a universe of objects that don't know each other, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches, becomes water, lilies on water, above and below water, becomes lilac and mauve and yellow and white cerulean lamps, small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take long streaming hair inside my brush to catch it, to paint the speed of light. Our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and changes our bones, skin, clothes to gases, Doctor. If only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms, and how infinitely the heart expands to claim this world. Blue vapor without end. This is a poem by Liesl Mueller. And I want to talk a little bit about that, but just to give you a visual on some of these works that Monet's works that she refers to, I'll let you pass those around. Not that I want to distract you from my words. This poem, Monet Refuses the Operation, is a fictionalized account of an aging Claude Monet and the response that he gives to his physician who has advised him to have cataract surgery, which he actually did. Liesl Mueller based this imaginative work on the facts of Monet's life as we know them. Monet indeed developed cataracts later in his life that affected his vision so severely that he was advised to have them removed, which he eventually did, but not until his painting career was pretty much over. Monet painted until well into his 80s, And he produced some of his most well-known works at the very end of his career. He knew his vision was failing him, and he was both troubled and intrigued by his declining vision. In a letter to a friend, he wrote this: "To think I was getting on so well, more absorbed than I have ever been, and expecting to achieve something. But I was forced to change my tune and to give up a lot of promising beginnings and abandon the rest. And on top of that, my poor eyesight makes me see everything in a complete fog. It's very beautiful all the same. And it's this that I wish I'd been able to convey." End of quote. If we follow the progression of Monet's paintings throughout his career, we see that the blending and merging of color and the lack of any definite outlines are the things that are characteristic not only of his works but of Impressionist painting in general. And it's so poetically described in Müller's little poem. These characteristics become more and more pronounced as Monet's career progresses, to the point that his the latest paintings in his career verge on the abstract. Also, as his career progresses, he begins to paint more and more with orange and yellow and red hues, typical of someone who is seeing through dense cataracts. Monet retired to his beloved Giverny estate in his later years to paint in seclusion, and the works that he created there are among his most famous. Monet's failing vision surprisingly opened up new vistas for his painting. Müller takes us inside the eye of the failing artist with her lucid recreation of Monet's style. But at the same time, she also conveys something else to us as well. As Monet aged, he came to see the world differently. And not all of it had to do with cataracts. As I have aged, the fact that I will die someday is becoming more and more on my mind. Sometime after I hit the big 50, I began to think of death as a light at the end of a tunnel. And it is becoming very clear to me that that light is getting bigger and bigger. And because of the shock that that light is applying to my system, I can remember the exact moment when I found this newfound conviction about aging. I was in a Kroger supermarket on a Wednesday buying groceries. Y'all have Kroger's here? No?
No less.
Okay, it's kind of like Winn-Dixie or Publix. Yeah. Georgia's full of them. But it was senior discount day. Now, I occasionally have to take my mother to Kroger on Wednesday. She won't go any other day other than Wednesday because she's got to have that discount. The only thing on this particular Wednesday was my mother wasn't with me. Exactly. I'd stop by to buy something for myself. But I got the discount anyway. Now, I could have just deluded myself by saying, well, the checkout clerk remembered me from a previous Wednesday and just assumed that I was shopping for my mother. But on this trip, I was purchasing personal care items for a man, aftershave and so forth. Nope, there's no doubt about it now. The clerk had wordlessly told me that in no uncertain terms, by giving me that discount, that I had now crossed over into senior. And once you cross that line, nothing short of plastic surgery can take you back. Actually, after I got used to the idea, senior discounts aren't bad once you get over the shock. I used to worry about whether I qualified. Some places give you the discount at 50, some 55, some 60, so forth. I once asked a waiter what age qualified to get the senior discount, 55 or 60, and he said, well, that's a gray area. So now I automatically asked for a senior discount in whatever restaurant I happen to be in. It's a great reward for something that didn't take any effort whatsoever. I didn't plan to become a senior. It just kind of happened. Senior discounts are a great thing. I've thought a lot about this, and I think I have come up with the answer to the rising cost of health care in our country. Now follow me for just a moment. A nursing home bed costs upward of $300 a day. It's probably more like $500 now. But with a senior discount and a long stay discount at the Holiday Inn Express, you can get a room for less than $90 a day. And there's no waiting list like there is at the nursing home. They've got vacancies tonight. They'll come to your room at any time to check on you. And all you have to do if you need a meal is order room service or call the front desk and tell them that you forgot something, your toothpaste or whatnot. They'll bring it to you. They have a van that'll take you anywhere. Breakfast is included. Now, we'd have to work out some kind of arrangements for the other two meals, but I'm sure with senior discounts for food, we could do with those other two meals a lot less than the 90 from 300. That's $210. And it's so much nicer. If you take those numbers and multiply it by the number of seniors that we have in this country, nursing home residents in this country, you've got some real savings here. You have to develop a sense of humor about these things, folks. It's the only way I'm getting through it. The works of Monet and the other Impressionists will require us to look past the form into the colors and the substance of the world as it's depicted. If you approach an Impressionist painting very closely and look at the canvas, it doesn't come across too good with those prints, but if you actually look at a painting, all you see is this riotous, nonsensical blotches of multiple distinct colors. And the individual brush strokes seem to have absolutely no association whatsoever with the subject that they are creating for It's only when you back away and view the work as a whole that you get a feeling for that. So it's all a matter of perspective. And you only appreciate it when you back away and see the big picture. The complete vision of what it is that is being represented to us in the painting. Perhaps this has something to do with why Impressionist painting is so well loved and has stood the test of time. The eye of the artist is creating such beauty for us in and through these random, seemingly nonsensical brushstrokes, dapples of color. That's exactly the same sense that we need to cultivate if we are to put some of the arbitrary events of our lives into perspective. And so as I attempt to understand aging, I'm learning to approach it as I would an Impressionist painting, with an eye out for the experience as a whole. One of the methods that I've adopted to learn about this process of aging is by observing those who I deem have been successful at it. One of those mentors of mine, someone who is very vital into his 80s, described his process very well, I think. I know people who are young, into their 90s, and I know some who are in their 40s that are already dying. The tragedy of old age is not getting there when you're old, but when you're young. End of quote. For him, the secret was his engagement in creative writing. In the workaday world that most of us inhabit for so much of our lives, creativity is sometimes rewarded, but more often it's discouraged. Corporations and institutions have fixed ways of doing things, and they just want employees to fit in, conform. And after a time, the creativity can get beaten out of us. When you have a mortgage to pay, a family to support, and a retirement plan that you're almost invested in, we become cautious and we go along to get along. And our urge to innovate and be creative and engage our creative imagination gets stuffed away in some closet of our soul, and maybe even forgotten. Aging gracefully requires us to rummage through that closet and bring that creativity out. Remember that musical instrument you used to play. Remember that story that you thought you might could put an interesting spin on. Remember when you wanted to get involved in a local theater group, and maybe even take an acting role. If you're like me, you may not have the artist's eye to see gas lamps as angels, but you do have some gift, some talent that the world is hungering for, some story or experience that the world needs to hear your spin on. Creativity can blossom at any age. Contrary to popular opinion that only the young are creative and old people are stuck in their ways, creativity actually gets easier as we age, because we get less inhibited. I do things now that my grandkids just cringe. Because we care less and less for the arbitrary standards of society. And unlike youth, this vast reservoir of experience to draw from. Another mentor of mine, a woman named Sarah. I met Sarah when I was in seminary at Candler School of Theology in Atlanta, at Emory. Sarah enrolled in seminary when she was 81 years old. Sarah had a smile that brightened everyone's day and such a keen mind and a spirit that was always eager to learn. When she was asked about going to seminary at her age, she would answer the question this way: I hope to finish seminary in 3 years, and I'll be 84. How old will I be if I don't go to seminary? I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that. Wow. Over the course of the year that I spent with Sarah and having similar classes, I watched Sarah. She made so many friends, and she was so admired for modeling success in aging with her grace and style. And over that year, she said something else that stayed with me. We do not stop playing because we're old. We grow old because we stop playing. Now, Sarah did seem to relish all the attention that she got, I admit. But she took her studies very seriously. And she always had that playful twinkle in her eye. She wasn't in seminary with her eyes on a career or some other purpose beyond the simple joys of learning. I so admire that. So much of what we get caught up in doing when we're younger has a purpose that extends beyond the activity itself. And so we forget the simple joy that activities bring in and of themselves. Taking a walk in nature, playing a game with a child, painting a picture, turning a pottery wheel, working in our garden, having a cup of coffee with a friend, listening to a piece of music. Those who have mastered the art of aging gracefully seem to have a whole litany of these things, these experiences that they can get caught up in and lose themselves in. The joy comes from the activity itself rather than any sense of accomplishment that they get from it. Even while in seminary, Sarah had a unique and vital ministry. She was affirming to everyone around her that life has worth, that there is joy and meaning in life, that our lives matter, no matter what our age. Life indeed had purpose for her, and every day offered her opportunities to learn and grow. Now, I have absolutely no idea where Sarah is today. But I'm sure that wherever she is, that she's continuing her legacy of convincing people that life can be enjoyed right up to its limits. In closing, I mentioned that I have become more and more convinced of my own mortality as I've aged, especially the last few years. But that's not really in a morbid sense. It seems that it's really part of the inner work that I needed to do. And that perhaps I felt the need to do it as a part of this process of aging gracefully. Whatever the reason, I'm thankful that I've discovered it. And it gave me a sense of urgency to begin can to better order my life and get a better handle on what my true values were and are. Rearrange what I gave priority to. What was I going to invest my time and energy and passion into in whatever time I have left upon the earth? For instance, when I was 40, I put a lot of time and energy into taking a couple of strokes off my golf game. Now, I hardly ever play golf. Now I put a lot more time into reading and reflecting and developing my capacity to express myself with writing. And I give greater priority to relationships and spending time with family and friends. I see those things as much more constructive ways to grow my spirit. So I guess that light at the end of the tunnel that's growing brighter and brighter each day is casting illumination on what's more important, so that I can see these things in the light, in such a light, that I've actually been convinced to make some significant life changes. Time that's passed cannot be recovered. But what has happened within that time is stored within the very essence of our being. It's a treasure that no one can take from us, and no turn of events can erase. As Viktor Frankl reminds us, Father Time is not a thief, he's a trustee. In the eternity of now, the people and events that we have lost ourselves in are ours forever. The secret of living well and aging gracefully is developing the capacity to live life fully, just in the sense of this idea. That is, we can look at aging with fear and sadness, like a desk calendar that we're tearing a page off each day, and it's growing thinner and thinner. Or we can take each of those pages and jot a few notes on the back of each page and savor the richness of what transpired during that day. The pride of our successes, the lessons we learned through failures, and the perspective we were given through our sufferings. Rather than having envy for youth, the person who has this capacity can relish the realities of the past, safely set down in memory. To cultivate and maintain this approach to life, it can become a mantra, a guiding principle. And that may be what it takes to age gracefully. So that, as the poet says, heaven can one day pull us into its arms, and the heart can infinitely expand to claim this world, blue vapor without end. May it be so.